You humans, you have eyes to see, but you see nothing. And you have ears to hear, but you hear nothing.
Created by aliens. The world is seething with hundreds of legends on extraterrestrial origin of the human race. For thousands of years, year in and year out, humans have believed in the existence of a certain deity that breathed life into a cold and empty space. The emergence and development of science has considerably reduced the number of followers that the theory of divine origin used to have. At the same time, not everybody would readily consider oneself to have evolved from apes. So, who are we and where do we come from? Just one more fact. Only 3% of our DNA makes up 22,000 genes of a human genome. The other 97% is often dismissed as genetic junk. Though, as a matter of fact, this junk may contain a coded message from the extraterrestrial creator. The question is when we'll manage to decipher it and whether we are capable of doing it at all.
According to Sumerian text, the Anunnaki, in advance of landing 445,000 years ago, sent androids to scout the Earth. 150,000 years later, the Anunnaki themselves arrive and create humankind. How was Adam created? According to the Sumerians, it was by genetic engineering, fertilization in vitro, in a glass tube, as depicted in this cylinder seal rendering.
Adam was the first test tube baby.
In Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, the Bible reads,
"Let us make the Adam in our image and likeness."
Further results of Mr. Sitchin's research affirm the theory that this visage of entwined snakes is the symbol for genetic manipulation of DNA.
It's time we should translate these old texts with new eyes. Angels were extraterrestrials. Heaven is not the place of happiness. Heaven is simply the space. An archangel is the leader of a group of extraterrestrials. Then you ask the archaeologists, what is this? Well, los dioses. Los dioses, the gods. Which gods? We don't know, the gods which they adored. I'm always accused it's not possible to travel between the stars. Forget it, it's very easy. The oldest god in Egypt is Osiris. But the word Osiris is the same as Orion. Isis is the same as Sirius. So it's all linked together with the stars. Inside the Great Pyramids are some shafts. I just will show it. And these shafts end on the belt, on the Orion belt, or at Sirius, Osiris and Isis. You see, in our solar system, we have 3 inner planets and then the outer planets. The inner planets means from the sun, you have first Mercury, Venus, Earth. Inside the Great Pyramid, there are 3 rooms, and you see the distance between one room and the other is not the same. It's the same distance as the 3 inner planets in our solar system. Or the Great Pyramid is just not standing somewhere by coincidence. The distance to the North Pole is the same as the distance to the center of the Earth. It is thousands and thousands of years ago. No one knows how long ago. But I guess at least 6,000 years. when gigantic spaceships surrounded our planet. And suddenly, a war took place in heaven. 2 of these cities in the sky were destroyed. And for the humans on earth, it looked as if 10,000 falling stars would come to the ground. Now this is all an old story, really 6,000 years old. And our first reaction would be, this must all be fantasy, just imagination. A war in heaven, around the earth, that's just ridiculous. But ladies and gentlemen, most of the old mythologies on our planet start with the war in heaven. That even in our religion, it starts with the war in heaven. Here, for example, we have a temple wall in Edfu, Egypt. The inscription says that the Pharaoh needed the help of his god, his name was Horhut, against his enemy. And his god flew up to the sky with the winged sun disk and destroyed in a few minutes 100,000 of the enemies. Which kind of God is this? We have the same situation in our own religion. Just read the book of the Kings, chapter 19, verse 35. There an angel from heaven killed in a few minutes 185,000 Assyrians. Just like this. No fight, no battle, no man against man. 185,000 Assyrians were killed. In 1974, long time ago, I had a secret speech at NASA in Huntsville, the American Space Agency. Secret because we both parties, we agreed that no one goes to public, neither the NASA engineers nor I. And on this speech, I was also talking for 5 minutes about Ezekiel. After my speech, the chief of the construction came to me, Mr. Joseph Brumrich, and said, "Hey, Mr. von Däniken, that was very interesting. I never read the Bible, but in the Bible you will definitely not find some technology. These are just visions, dreams. Ezekiel probably saw the Lord sitting on his throne, moving around, or he had some dream, but no technology in the Bible. This is impossible." Anyhow, he said, "You made me interesting about this Ezekiel. Now I will read it for the first time." He speaks 3 languages. He took 3 Bibles in different languages and started to read Ezekiel. And all of a sudden, he was fascinated because Ezekiel described in detail something which they, the NASA scientists, the NASA engineers, had on their table, on the design table. So Mr. Joseph Brumrich became suspicious. And a small group of NASA scientists came together and they took the Bible, Ezekiel, word by word. They started to recalculate. What was this? The splendorness of the highest. And finally, they reconstructed the object. And that was the result. This is not a spaceship with which you could move from star to star. Today, we would call it a space shuttle. There must be a mother spaceship in orbit, and from this mother spaceship, this vehicle comes down. The old Egyptian called the same thing the winged sun god, or the old Indians called it the Vimanas. There were different types of Vimana. Ezekiel calls it the splendorness of the highest. On top he sees something glittering. Inside there was a throne. On this throne somebody like a human was sitting in glittering clothes. It was simply the commander of the spacecraft in his spacesuit. Then he sees 4 living creatures with 4 wings. But what do you see, living creatures here? Do not forget, at Ezekiel's time, technology, something like a motor, did not exist. When something moved by itself, for them, it was living. There's no doubt that he means his helicopter, because he describes the noise they made and even says, when the wings stood still, they were hanging down. When the noise started again, the wings started to rotate. When the wings went up from the earth, the wheels went up too from the earth. Of course, when a helicopter is lifted up, its wheel will also be lifted up. Finally, the wheel. He describes this wheel which could go in every direction, forward, backward, left and right. When you read Ezekiel, you will realize that from chapter 40, something new happens. You know, chapter 1 to 40, he describes this vehicle, the splendorness of the highest. And in chapter 40, he says, the splendorness of the highest arrived again, so a second time. At this time, the hand of the highest put me up on the second throne. So in my modern view, he's simply sitting on the co-pilot's seat. He's sitting there, and they make a lift up, and Ezekiel feels, he says, the hand of the highest were pressing upon my chest. They go somewhere, Ezekiel has no idea where. He writes, they brought me on a very, very high mountain. He makes it clear, very, very high mountain. And up there he sees something like a small city or a bigger village. And in the center of it, something like a temple. In the original, Ezekiel never says there was a temple. It always says there was something like a temple. You should ask yourself, what was a temple some thousands of years ago? Simply a building for the gods. What was a temple for our forefathers? A temple was a place where the gods were living. Later, we made temples, churches, in believing that now God will come into there, but in the original then. So, he saw something like a temple in this big village or small city. He is sitting himself in the splendorness of the God on the co-pilot seat. The splendorness of the Lord comes to a standstill over the temple. Slowly, slowly, he sinks inside the so-called temple. And Ezekiel realized at that moment that the noise of the wings were this time higher and louder than what he had heard before in the desert, because now the echo comes back from the walls of the so-called temple. Then it comes to a standstill. Ezekiel gets out of the space shuttle, and of a sudden a glittering being appears again, one of the strangers, and he says to Ezekiel, "Oh humans, you have eyes to see, but you see nothing, and you have ears to hear, but you hear nothing." And then the man in glittering suit gives Ezekiel a measuring device and orders him to measure this whole building, the so-called temple. Ezekiel, in the meantime, he understands that this has nothing to do with God. So he has courage. He asks back to the glittering man, why? Why should I measure this temple? And the other one says, that's the reason why we brought you here, humans. So Ezekiel starts to measure length and wide and how many stairs, etc. The so-called temple was nothing else but the base station for the extraterrestrial shuttle. I'm always accused it's not possible to travel between the stars. Forget it, it's very easy. By doing so, you create centrifugal force. Centrifugal force works like an artificial gravity. You have ground under your feet. Then you make an engine and you start to travel very, very slowly. If this thing, after 100 years, would only reach the speed of, let's say, 2% of the speed of light, you would reach the distance of 10 light years within 500 Earth years. Now you say, come on, now humans will survive 500 Earth years. It's not necessary. This is a generation spaceship. The information of life has come from outside. It did not start on this planet. And this, by the way, is the most modern scientific knowledge. Now, in this sense, panspermia, we are the offsprings of extraterrestrials.